Hello, leaders of the world. Welcome to Spread Love in Organizations, a podcast for purpose-driven healthcare leaders striving to make life better around the world by leading their teams with genuine care, servant leadership, and love. I'm Naji, your host for this episode, joined by Phil Johnson, founder and CEO of Master of Business Leadership program. For the past 21 years, Phil has been an executive coach, teacher, and mentor dedicated to helping executives and organizations achieve remarkable results. His program touched leaders across the globe and in very different industries. Phil was a corporate executive in the semiconductor industry for 20 years before founding MBL. Phil, I am thrilled to have you with me today.
Naji, it's a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you.
First, I would love to hear your personal story, from an executive in the semiconductor industry to an exec coach, teacher, working specifically on emotional intelligence. What's in between the line of your incredible journey?
Great question. I was born with dyslexia, and I'm 68 years old. I was born back in 1953 with dyslexia. And that's a neurological disorder that can cause me to rearrange words and numbers in my mind, and also affects my hearing from time to time. But back in those days, there was no such thing as dyslexia or ADD or ADHD. You were just labeled a slow learner. And I didn't do very well in grade school up until grade 7. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 5. And was labeled a slow learner. And my mother died in December of 1967. And in January of 1968, 54 years ago, I decided I wanted to do this work. I became what you would call maybe a super overachiever. I went on and got a BCom, most of an MBA, studied electrical engineering, and spent 20 years in the semiconductor industry, traveling about 60,000 miles a year throughout North America and the Pacific Rim. And by 1990, I had accomplished more than I or anyone else ever thought I would. But I was surprised at the lack of leadership, the real leadership, inspirational leadership, and emotional intelligence. So that motivated me to develop and do what I do today. I developed the Master of Business Leadership program, and it's designed to create inspirational leaders, raise levels of emotional intelligence, and raise level of awareness in general.
Thanks, Phil, for sharing part of your story. As you have been coaching and helping executives around the world, different industries, you talked also just now about real leadership. What is for you real leadership? What is this key capability that you think, or trait, that is crucial these days for leaders in such a volatile world we're living in?
Yeah. Actions, behavior that inspires followers. Behavior and results that inspire followers. So truly authentic, emotionally intelligent leaders don't require a title. As a matter of fact, if you need a title to get people to follow you, you're not a leader. You're using position-based power to control and manipulate others. And leadership is not a title. It's not a position. It's a choice that each one of us needs to make.
So in the leadership you describe, and you obviously coach people, you talk a lot about emotional intelligence, empathy, EQ, so many different words that I'd love to get your take on this. And how would you define it?
Sure. Very simply, emotional intelligence is developed by doing what I refer to as emotional labor. And what that means is that whenever we take an action that moves us outside of our comfort zone, that always creates anxiety in us. As a part of our brain, which I'm sure most, if not all of your listeners know, of the amygdala that secretes cortisol into our bloodstream. causes the executive center of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, to shut off, and we typically witness some type of flight, fight, or freeze mode, which psychologists refer to as an amygdala hijack. So, and that's just one of the three major sources of resistance we have to change. So a real easy understanding of emotional intelligence is it's an experiential process that gets developed by feeling the anxiety that change and innovation creates in us and move through it towards the vision of our desired results, as opposed to allowing that anxiety to control us. So we need to have an emotional connection to a desired result that's stronger than the fear that gets generated when we leave our comfort zone.
I love this definition as it's different from what we're used to here. So can you tell us a little bit more about it? How do you coach people, for example? How would you recommend as leaders we work on this to get to this emotional connection to the end results?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I want to take a step back a little bit before moving forward, and that the central thesis of my work that I've been proving all over the world for the last 21 years is there's an underlying energy physics that makes the results of going through this process as predictable and quantifiable as any physical science. What I mean is that a lot of the habits that we unconsciously have developed from an early age are habits that cause us to give away our energy. And we do it in a myriad of ways: how we communicate, listen, take responsibility, make decisions, all sorts of ways. And when we do that, it creates an energy deficit in us, so that at the same time we're giving away our energy on the one hand, we're needing to replace that energy by trying to steal the energy from other people on the other hand. And that dynamic is going on inside of everybody, everywhere, all over the world, all the time. So what I do in the MBL program is I show people how they're unconsciously giving away their energy, and I give them better habits to practice to stop doing that. And when they stop giving away their energy, the need to steal the energy of other people goes away. And in that process is how they develop their emotional intelligence. They raise their level of consciousness about what's going on in and around them, and they become more inspirational leaders. So those are the three major outcomes from going through this process.
Yeah, and it's so true. Many times we don't think about this finite amount of energy that we have, infinite amount of time, and how we want to distribute this to our purpose, right? To what we're trying to achieve in this world.
I'll throw something else in here, and that's that we're facing a tsunami of change with a 500 million year old brain that doesn't like change. So some scientists estimate that in this century, we could experience the equivalent of 20,000 years worth of change, or 2,200 centuries worth of change. So change is increasing at an exponential rate. Never happened before to this degree. And we really are terrible at adjusting to change. So that's going to create a lot of drama, chaos, and conflict. Let me give you an analogy of the importance of emotional intelligence. If you think of your amygdala as a very frightened 4-year-old child, our emotional intelligence acts like a big brother or a big sister to quiet the amygdala response down and better enable us to feel the fear and anxiety that change and innovation creates in us and move through it towards the vision of our desired results, as opposed to allowing that anxiety to control us, to keep us stuck in our comfort zones. So emotional intelligence is an experiential process. It's not an intellectual process. In other words, you can't develop emotional intelligence by having a conversation or reading a book or watching a video. It's based on how you move through drama, chaos, and conflict, how you learn to stop giving away your energy. That's how you develop your emotional intelligence. And it's a critical part of our development that's missing. Our educational system and our employment system has really failed to prepare us for the world we live in today, because they focus primarily on our ability to do intellectual labor and have done little or nothing to develop our emotional intelligence. And the development of our emotional intelligence acts like a massive result multiplier. Example, think of your genetic ability to do intellectual labor as getting $1,000 a day for 31 days. So at the end of 31 days, you've got $310,000. Think of the development of emotional intelligence as a penny doubling every day for 31 days. At the end of 31 days, you've got $10.7 million. At the end of 40 days, you've got over 5 billion. At the end of 50 days, you've got over 5 trillion. So the development of emotional intelligence is meant to work with intellectual intelligence and dramatically improves our results.
So you said, Phil, that it's experiential rather than anything else. So I believe, well, you believe, since you have the MBL and you've been coaching people, that this is something that is coachable. EQ is not something that you're just born with. This is something that you can develop experience. What do you need for you to develop this? Because we hear so many times, like some people, high IQ, no EQ. Does it start with the willingness to learn, or is there something else?
Yeah, great question. IQ is largely genetic. So not everybody can have 160 IQ. If you have a high IQ, your parents had a high IQ, their parents had a high IQ, and you just happen to be born into that genetic pool. But anybody can develop their emotional intelligence. It's not inherited, it's developed. It's an experiential process that you develop by learning how to lower your walls and move through the fear that change and anxiety creates in us. Lowering your walls, moving through your fear, gives you insights into yourself and other people that are essential to the development of your emotional intelligence.
I will move now to a portion of the podcast where I will give you a word, and I'd love to get your first reaction to it.
Sure.
So the first word is leadership.
Service.
The second one is coach.
Sherpa.
Can you tell us more about it?
Guide.
And how do you balance, there's a lot of discussions of coaching versus management and then leadership. Like, since you're an executive coach, how do you define those differences?
I actually view myself as a coach, teacher, and mentor. So I kind of, depending on the circumstances, go back and forth. Coaching is really about helping the individual to find their own answers within them. Teaching is about providing information, and mentoring is specific information related to what they're doing, industry related or career related or something. But the challenge is that we're only conscious about 3 to 5% of the time. And the rest of the time, we're relying on our unconscious habits to determine our behavior and our results. And there's an awful lot we don't know. There's an awful lot we've never been taught. So there is a necessity for teaching, and there is a necessity for application and coaching of the teaching. So management, you can't manage people. That is an old industrial age, archaic industry. Back in the 20th century, profitability came from the economies of scale associated with bigness. It came from the machines. and you needed people to build and run the machines. But people were considered an expense, a necessary evil. The profitability came from the machines. You look at a balance sheet or an income statement, people are still considered expenses. And in reality, they're the organization's greatest asset. So you can't manage people, you manage processes, you manage things. You need to lead people, you need to inspire people. The current level of employee engagement worldwide, according to Gallup, is about 13%. So that is an indication that most organizations are very toxic environments with low levels of employee and customer engagement. The low levels of customer engagement are costing the US economy alone over $1 trillion a year. So we have to get away from the idea of trying to manage people, and we have to develop our leadership in order to inspire them to want to contribute more. We need to inspire them to want to lower their walls and take more risk, especially during these times of accelerating change. I'll give you an example of a company that's currently doing over $1 trillion a year in revenue. And their whole hiring process is on the search for people with above average levels of emotional intelligence. I don't know who that company is. It's Apple. Apple's whole hiring process is centered around the search for people with above average levels of emotional intelligence. They're less interested in what you know about their products and services. They can teach you that. But the real scarce commodity is emotional intelligence. That's why when you walk into an Apple store, that energy you feel is an example of a more emotionally intelligent environment. They're not trying to sell you anything. They're trying to understand your pain and, if possible, provide a solution that can help you. Whether you buy anything or not is secondary. They want you to have a great experience. Maybe you'll go tell your friends, and maybe they'll tell their friends. Mm-hmm. So I think another part of your question is there's only two sources of motivation that will cause us to leave our comfort zone. There's only two sources of motivation that will cause us to do the emotional labor, take the risk of leaving our comfort zone. One is pain, the other one is passion. So lots of people want better results, but unless they're being motivated to leave their comfort zone, they're not going to get those results. Most people aren't willing to do the emotional labor that change requires. So what they've been doing for a long time is using position-based power to try and get other people to change. See, if you're not willing to change, the only other alternative you have is try and get everybody else to change. And that's what we've been doing. We've been relying on titles and position-based power to control and manipulate others to get them to change. And it's produced terrible results. 13% employee engagement, 13% worldwide. It's a massive cost. And there's almost a one-to-one correlation between the level of employee engagement and the level of customer engagement. So if your employees don't feel engaged, neither do your customers.
Yeah. And it's linked to the results, right?
Yeah. So people with high IQs, on the one hand, because of the model we live in, that's how they get results. That's how they succeed. But it's also what holds them back from developing their emotional intelligence. Because when we get scared, we run to our strength, typically. And if our strength is our ability to do intellectual work, that's where we go, and away from our weakness. So you're right. A lot of people with high IQs have low EQs. So they get hired for their intellectual ability, and they get fired for a lack of emotional intelligence, or they get passed over for promotion because nobody can work with them.
And I love it, with how you're framing it. And I would say you're a proof, and we can see it with more and more leaders, that high EQs doesn't mean lower analytical skills or lower, because many times it's kind of confronted, one or the other. Well, in fact, it's the combination, as you're saying, of both that made great leadership.
It creates a massive multiplier effect on results. For most people, the results they're getting have been based primarily on their ability to do intellectual labor. So here's an analogy. The iceberg. Think of the tip of the iceberg, the 1/10 of the iceberg sticking above the water, as your ability to do intellectual labor. The 9/10 under the water is your ability to do emotional labor. So developing your emotional intelligence will have a massive, massive multiplier effect on your results, both as an individual and as an organization. Look at Apple. Other companies are following their example. Google, FedEx, JetBlue, Infosys, Whole Foods. The development of emotional intelligence represents the future of organizational development. And quite frankly, if we're not investing massively in the development of our emotional intelligence, I think we're going to have great difficulty in surviving this century as a species. I think we're at a tipping point as a species, and we need to be developing our emotional intelligence to survive.
I agree. And leading from a place of love, as I will always say.
Yep.
The third word is, and I see it behind you, servant warrior.
Yeah. I actually wrote a book called The Servant Warrior Leader back in 2006. And what that refers to is obviously service to others, service to ourselves, and warrior. Warrior means there's an internal battle going on within inside of us to resist change. So the battle isn't an external battle. The battle that we're fighting is an internal battle to lower our walls, to become less resistive, less judgmental, less attached to outcome. Another word for that is enlightened. So the battle is not external. We're not if we think that our challenges are external, if we're having battle with other people, it means simply that we're giving away our energy to them, and they're probably giving away their energy to us, which creates the drama, chaos, and conflict. The real battle, the real challenge, is an internal battle within us to learn to lower our walls. So
the last word is spread love in organizations.
Lowering your walls spreads love. Inspirational leadership is love. People follow inspirational leaders because of love, because they feel safe, because they feel safe to take risk, move outside of their comfort zone. They're inspired to grow. They're not being held down, they're being lifted up. See, position-based power quotation leaders aren't trying to lift people up, they're trying to hold them down. True leaders use their example, their personal example, to lift people up, to inspire people to get on their own journey of reconnecting with who they truly are. And in the process, everybody benefits.
Any final word of wisdom, Phil, for leaders around the world?
Yeah, I really encourage, request, hope that everybody will challenge themselves to begin the development of their emotional intelligence. It's not an easy process, but it will guarantee the rest of your life will be the best of your life. It will guarantee career success. It will guarantee personal success. And the awareness you develop, the results you generate, will knock your socks off. See, the development, because emotional intelligence is an experiential process, you can only connect the dots after you've taken the leap of faith. You can only connect the dots in hindsight. And I often ask people I coach, and as they're going through the process, or and they're going, "This is amazing. This is incredible. I can't believe it." And I said, "Yeah, I know. But is there anything I could have said to you in the beginning that could have prepared you for what you know now?" And the answer is always no. See, you have to be willing to take the leap of faith to begin the journey before you can truly understand the value and importance of emotional intelligence in your life. So bet on yourself, take the leap, and start doing the work. I guarantee you will not regret it.
Thank you so much, Phil, for this inspiring chat today.
My pleasure.
Thank you all for listening to Spread Love in Organizations podcast. Drop us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Connect with us on SpreadLoveIO.com or on LinkedIn. Most importantly, spread love in your organizations and spread the word around you to inspire others and amplify this movement our world so desperately needs.